The now retired and in fact now deceased goaltender of the Montreal Canadiens, Jacques Plante, once remarked about being a National Hockey League goaltender, saying that it was the only employment situation in the world where every time you made a mistake, a red light went on and 15,000 people booed you. Francis Fox would know a bit of what Plante speaks because on January 30, 1978, only 3 months into the big experiment of televised debates in the House of Commons, Mr. Fox made an extremely personal and anguishing comment before not just the House of Commons, but the entirety of Canada. While we have not asked him directly about this, it is probably safe to say that this was the worst day of his life. January 30, 1978 was a Monday, and since the previous Friday, the 27th, Canadian newspaper headlines had been running stories about Mr. Fox's transgressions. Mr. Fox then being the Solicitor General in the government of Pierre Trudeau. When the House of Commons opened for business on January 30, Mr. Fox, to his merit, showed up. What ensued was the very first ever live resignation of a cabinet minister in the history of the government of Canada. It was also, or recorded on video, it was also one of the most poignant moments ever in the video records of the House of Commons. Francis Fox had been born and raised in Montreal and was elected to the House of Commons in the 1972 election representing the Liberal Party of Canada. He was twice re-elected, in fact, in elections held subsequent to his resignation, the resignation being the subject matter of this clip. He was a graduate of the University of Montreal, the Université de Montréal. He had also graduated and attended Harvard Law School and Oxford University. Fox caught the attention of Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau as an up-and-comer and was appointed Solicitor General of Canada in 1976, even though he was then only 36 years old. But he was also fluently bilingual and a lawyer. And as a Solicitor General, he was responsible for many components of the federal judicial system that could look at things such as political ethics. Unbeknownst to most of Canada in the months leading up to the events or the revelation of January 30, 1978, Fox was being unfaithful to his wife, Joan Pennefather, with whom he had a child, John Fox. Even more curious is the fact that even after revelations of his misconduct, he was on at least 2 other occasions by subsequent Liberal governments appointed to public positions for which one would think that matters of personal integrity would matter. John Turner appointed Fox Minister of International Trade, and Paul Martin, when he was Prime Minister, appointed Francis Fox to the Senate. Fox resigned his Senate seat in November of 2011. And at the risk of sounding a little bit like a grocery store Hollywood gossip rag, the rest of the story is that he and Mrs. Pennefather were divorced. Fox remarried a woman called Vivian Case, with whom he had a further son and a daughter. On January 30th, 1978, you could hear a pin drop in the House of Commons, especially when the Speaker made it known that he had received a request from the Solicitor General to make a brief statement. Mr. Fox apparently was walking right up to the guillotine. As a lawyer, I know the value of being extremely cautious with allegations of misconduct because they are often false and spread by people who have an interest in diminishing the reputation of an innocent party. Two extremely fertile areas for this is both politics and also employment law, where an employer can become angry with what he or she perceives as barriers to the termination of an employee that he or she no longer wants, and will get frustrated and just build up this fabulous false set of allegations about the employee in order to try to intimidate the employee, hoping that the cowed employee would then leave of his or her own volition. Francis Fox, though he was a lawyer, in fact, he later became a senior partner in the Montreal law firm of Martin O. Walker. But for Mr. Fox on that January day in 1978, the so-called allegations that were floating around in the media were apparently truthful. One can only imagine the meeting that must have occurred between Mr. Fox and Prime Minister Trudeau, likely on that very morning, if not on the telephone, in this month of January 1978. Quite likely the first words out of Pierre Trudeau's mouth would have been whether the allegations were truthful. And if Fox replied honestly, as he probably did, given the subsequent events, there would have been and could have been only one result. And that is what occurred in the House of Commons very soon thereafter, and as recorded for posterity by the cameras of the House of Commons in this clip.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to inform the House that I resigned from the Cabinet on Friday. I would like to tell the House of the events that led to my resignation. A few years ago, before I entered the Cabinet, I was involved in a brief liaison with a married woman who became pregnant. She subsequently applied and secured the required permission for a therapeutic abortion. On her admission to hospital, I signed the name of her husband to an admitting document. This fact has become known in the last few days. I discussed it with the Prime Minister and tendered my resignation, which he has accepted. I have today instructed my counsel to advise the Attorney General of the province concerned so that he may be apprised of the matter. Mr. Speaker, these are the facts which the House should know. I take full responsibility for them. I would implore honourable members and the media to let these facts speak for themselves and not seek further details which would only cause harm to other individuals and families. This incident in no way affected the work I undertook as Solicitor General, nor was it known to any official with whom I have worked. I deeply regret the difficulty that my resignation may cause to the Prime Minister and to my colleagues in the Cabinet. I consider it a great personal honour to have served during the past 16 months as a member of the Cabinet and through it the people of Canada. I leave the office of Solicitor General of Canada in circumstances which I deeply regret, but with the hope that the Ministry and its agencies have been well served during my tenure. Thank you.
What has always struck me about that resignation is the fact that very likely in fraudulently putting the name of his girlfriend's husband on admission documents for the purposes of a medical procedure, the Solicitor General would have committed an offense under some provincial statute. It's unlikely that there is no provision in the jurisdiction in which this event occurred that would not have prohibited the intentional entry of false information on a medical record. And yet he doesn't mention that in his resignation, which is unfortunate because I think it ought to have been mentioned. And he, as I mentioned earlier, he didn't disappear for long. He was quickly on the payroll, quickly back in the payroll of the federal government, first as Minister of International Trade and then as in the Senate. And his constituents were stupid enough to vote him back in as well. So